Night had fallen, and I was driving my old car down a desolate highway, the vast desert stretching endlessly on both sides, interrupted only by the occasional flicker of streetlights on distant power poles. I'd been on the road 4 hours, my phone had lost signal, and the gas gauge was creeping dangerously close to empty. I cursed under my breath how the hell did I not notice the fuel running low. If I broke down out here in the middle of nowhere, I'd be screwed until morning. Just then, a faint red glow appeared on the horizon. As I got closer, the source of the light became clear, an old roadside diner. A flickering neon sign read diner, though the O was barely hanging on, blinking in and out like it was on its last breath. I exhaled in relief. At least, there was some sign of life. Maybe they knew where I could find gas. I pulled into the lot, stopping next to 2 ancient blue gas pumps. Their paint was peeling, rust creeping along the edges, looking like they hadn't dispensed a drop in decades. The diner's glass door reflected the dim yellow glow from inside. Everything was still. No cars, no movement. I pushed the door open, and the scent of old grease and aged wood hit me. The place looked frozen in time. Red and white checkered tablecloths, vinyl booths, a chrome-trimmed counter. The walls were lined with yellowed photographs, the faces in them long forgotten. In the corner, an old jukebox let out a faint electric hum, like it was still alive, but barely hanging on. There was only one person inside, a waitress in a faded pink uniform, standing behind the counter, wiping a coffee cup with slow, deliberate movements. She had golden curls and bright red lipstick, like she'd stepped right out of a 1950s postcard. But something was off. Her motions were too controlled, too repetitive, like a wind-up doll stuck in an endless loop. "Hey, had you guys got gas here?" I asked, clearing my throat, my voice cutting through the unnatural silence. She lifted her head, her smile unfurling in a way that felt wrong, like it had been painted on. "Of course," she said, her voice raspy, but weirdly rehearsed. "Would you like some coffee? Travelers always need a cup of coffee." A slow chill curled its way up my spine. Something about the way she said it had made my skin crawl, but I nodded anyway and slid onto a stool at the counter. She turned, poured a cup of black coffee, and slid it in front of me. I glanced down. The surface trembled slightly, sending ripples through the inky liquid. There was a faint musty smell, like something that had been sitting out too long. My stomach twisted, but I took a sip out of politeness. It was bitter, acrid, like it had been burned and left to die in the pot. "You own this place?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going, to make things feel normal. Her hand paused mid-wipe. Then, slowly, she shook her head. That eerie smile deepened, her gaze drifting somewhere far away, like she was remembering something. The bell above the door jingled. I turned, heart kicking up a notch, but the door hadn't moved. Outside, the night was still. I turned back to her. She hadn't moved either, but now, her smile seemed wider. That deep, gut-level unease started turning into full-on dread. I needed to get gas, and get the hell out of here. "Where are the pumps?" I asked, standing up, trying not to let my voice shake. "Right outside," she nodded. "But, do you really have to go?" Her tone made my skin crawl. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked to the door, pushing it open a little too hard. As I stepped outside, I glanced back one last time. She was still there, standing perfectly still, head tilted, eyes locked onto me, smile frozen in place. I forced myself to keep moving, striding toward the pumps. But the moment I got close, my stomach dropped. No hoses, just rusted, hollow shells, long out of service. A wave of cold fear slammed into me. I turned toward my car, ready to leave, but then I saw it. A vehicle was parked a few feet away, one that hadn't been there before. And inside, in the driver's seat, was a man. He was wearing a suit, his hair slicked back, his skin an unnatural grey. His eyes were sunken, hollow. Unlike the waitress, his head was tilted at that same disturbing angle. His lips were stretched into that same eerie, frozen smile. My brain short-circuited. Slowly, I turned back toward the diner window. The waitress hadn't moved. She was still watching me, still smiling. My breath turned shallow. My pulse hammered against my ribs. A faint chuckle sounded behind me. I spun around. The man in the car hadn't moved, but now. His face was pressed against the window, his mouth stretched impossibly wide, teeth yellow and jagged. I stumbled back, my body screaming at me to run, and I did. I threw myself into my car, slammed the door, and floored it, tearing away from that diner as fast as the engine would take me. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not until I was miles down the road, surrounded by nothing but darkness. When I finally glanced up, my heart still hammering, there was nothing behind me. Just an empty stretch of highway, swallowed by the night. After working overtime 4 days, my body felt completely drained, like an empty shell. My head was heavy, my steps sluggish. The streets were almost deserted at this hour, the night swallowing every trace of life. I dragged myself toward a small diner, its soft candlelight flickering through the window, offering an odd sense of comfort. It wasn't much to look at, a quiet little place with only a few scattered tables. In the corner sat an old ceramic vase, filled with dried ornamental plants. The air was still, unnervingly so. A young male waiter emerged from behind the counter. His voice was low and steady, his polite smile almost too perfect. I gave him a nod and picked a seat by the window, barely glancing at the menu before ordering something simple. Not long after, a steaming plate of food arrived, its aroma momentarily easing the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. As I ate, my eyelids grew heavier, the fatigue creeping in. By the time I took the last bite, I could barely keep my eyes open. Just a short rest, I thought, leaning against the table, allowing my body to relax. I didn't know how long I had been out when a soft sound woke me. Tap, 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 a faint knocking, barely audible. Groggy, I blinked, trying to shake off the drowsiness. The diner was still empty. The candlelight flickered lazily, casting long, shifting shadows across the wooden surfaces. The ceramic vase, the menu on my table, everything was just as I had left it. Tap, 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 louder this time. I turned my head sharply toward the window, and every hair on my body stood on end. The glass was covered in handprints. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, overlapping in chaotic layers, fingers spread wide as if someone knew. Many people had desperately pressed their hands against it, trying to push through. The marks varied. Some looked fresh, others faded and smudged, as if they had been there for a long time. My breath hitched. Beyond the glass, the night was a suffocating void. But within that darkness, I saw them, figures, shadowy, faceless shapes, their outlines barely distinguishable from the night itself. They didn't move like normal people, they glided, soundless and weightless, eyes like pale glimmers in the abyss. They weren't just watching, they were waiting. A crack formed on the window, thin, almost imperceptible, but growing. I could feel them pressing against it, pushing, forcing their way in. A sharp chill seeped through the fracture, crawling into my bones. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then the chair scraped against the floor as I stumbled back, knocking it over with a loud clatter. My chest tightened, breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Someone's outside, I gasped, pointing at the window, my voice raw with terror. The waiter stepped closer, his expression unreadable. He followed my gaze to the glass. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. But he just shook his head, his voice calm, almost indifferent. "Sir, there's nothing there." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process his words. That was impossible. I spun back toward the window. The handprints were gone, the figures, the crack in the glass vanished. Outside, the street lay empty, blanketed in thick fog. "You've been working too hard," the waiter said, his voice smooth, reassuring. "Would you like some tea?" I hesitated, my pulse still hammering. My mind screamed at me that something wasn't right, that what I saw was real. But exhaustion was creeping in again, dulling my thoughts, making me question myself. Slowly, I let out a shaky breath. Yeah, that'd be nice. Moments later, a cup of steaming tea was placed in front of me. I wrapped my hands around it, letting the warmth seep into my fingers, but it did nothing to chase away the lingering chill in my bones. Outside, the night remained silent, the street emptied out, and yet, even as I forced myself to look away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching. I stumbled upon this restaurant while traveling. It was late at night, the streets eerily empty, the surrounding shops long closed. Only this place remained lit, its warm glow standing alone in the darkness. My stomach growled. After a moment of hesitation, I pushed the door open. A soft chime rang as the wind bell above the door swayed. The air was thick with the scent of spices. Inside, the decor was old, almost vintage. Tables and chairs were neatly arranged, each draped with lace-trimmed tablecloths. Plates, silverware, and half-eaten food littered the tables, as if the diners had just left. But it was too quiet, unsettlingly quiet. I scanned the room. No waiters, no customers, just a woman sitting by the window in a blue dress, her back to me. Her head was tilted downward. I hesitated before walking toward the counter. Clearing my throat, I called out, "Hello, is anyone here?" No response. Frowning, I turned toward the woman, figuring I'd ask how to order. She didn't move. She just kept eating. Her table was filled with steaming dishes of sizzling steak, golden brown bread, tender stewed vegetables. Everything looked freshly served. Yet she never lifted her head, never acknowledged my presence. She just ate, shoveling food into her mouth, bite after bite, like someone who had been starving 4 days. As the minutes passed, her movements became more frantic. Her utensils scraped harshly against the plate, the sound sharp and grating. Then, suddenly, she threw the knife and fork aside, using her bare hands to grab the food. Her fingers, slick with sauce, tore into the steak, yanking off chunks of meat and stuffing them into her mouth. Grease dripped between her fingers, her lips, now glistening with oil, smacked weightily with every chew. She didn't care about the heat. She didn't care about the bones. I watched in horror as she bit down on a rib, snapping it with a sickening crack and swallowing the shards whole. Her hands were covered in grease and bits of meat, her breathing turning into guttural growls like a wild animal lost in the madness of hunger. An icy shiver crawled down my spine. I didn't want to be here anymore. Slowly, carefully, I stood up and turned toward the door. But before I could take a step, a loud crash. The sound of a chair slamming against the floor. I froze, my pulse pounded in my ears. Slowly, I turned back. She wasn't eating anymore. She was staring at me, her face, smeared with food and grease, twisted into something unhinged, like a predator finally spotting its prey. She licked her lips, her tongue too long, unnaturally sliding over the scraps clinging to her mouth. Then, in one sudden, violent motion, she shot to her feet. Her movements were wrong. She didn't just stand, she lunged, as if her body was powered by something unnatural. Her limbs bent at odd angles, fingers splayed. Her nails had turned black, jagged, like claws. Her eyes gleamed with an eerie red glow. And her mouth, God, her mouth stretched impossibly wide, far beyond human limits, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from her throat, raw with hunger. Then she pounced. Instinct kicked in. I ducked just in time. Her claws sliced through the air, barely missing my face. I stumbled back, hitting the ground hard, my mind screaming one thing, run, but she was faster. Before I could get up, she twisted her body unnatural, inhuman, and lunged again. I grabbed the nearest chair and swung with all my strength. The wood shattered against her. splinters flying, knocking her back a step. But she didn't stay down. Her head jerked sideways with a sickening crack. Then, slowly, she turned back toward me, lips curling into a twisted grin. Panic surged through me. I grabbed a glass bottle from the table and smashed it against her head. The glass shattered, shards slicing into her flesh. She shrieked, stumbling back, her wail piercing and inhuman. I didn't wait, I ran. Bolting toward the back of the restaurant, I yanked at every door I could find, but they were all locked. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating, trapping me inside. Behind me, the shrieking grew louder. She was coming. My breath hitched, hands trembling. I was out of time. Then my fingers brushed against something cold, a metal door. Without thinking, I shoved it open and stumbled inside. The kitchen. I slammed the door shut, pressing my full weight against it. But she was already ramming into it, slamming her body against the metal, denting it with every impact. The door wouldn't hold for long. Frantically, my eyes darted across the kitchen. I needed a weapon, anything. Then I saw it, a pot, still burning, a vat of boiling oil. The door buckled, the hinges groaning. One more hit and she'd be through. I gritted my teeth, lifting the heavy pot with both hands. The heat seared through my skin, but I didn't care. The moment the door exploded open, she lunged at me, her mouth stretching open, ready to bite. And I threw the scalding oil straight at her. The effect was instant. She screamed. The sound was inhuman, shrill and deafening. Her body convulsed as the boiling liquid scorched her flesh, blackening it in seconds. The air filled with the sickening stench of burning meat. She thrashed wildly, clawing at herself, her body twisting and writhing in agony. I didn't stay to watch. I ran. This time, when I reached the front door, it opened. I burst outside, gasping for air, the cold night wind biting against my skin. My legs nearly gave out beneath me as I turned back toward the building. But it was gone. No restaurant, no lights. Just an empty street, silent and endless beneath the darkened sky.